So in this video, I want to help you pick the proper enclosure size for your ball python. And let me tell you, as a breeder, it's probably one of the biggest struggles that I go through just trying to organizing all my snakes. So I have a whole bunch of different sizes in these ARS racks behind me. These are pretty much grow out racks straight behind me. And then over on this side, these are all hatchling racks over here. I have some bigger racks, some ARS 7030s. I also have some ARS 8018s. And let me tell you, I go through a lot of mixing up and changing my ball pythons from one tub to another. And the other thing you have to really think about is, especially if you're a breeder, I've seen a lot of breeders do this. They're like brand new, they're gung-ho, they have a lot of money, they jump right into it and say, oh yeah, I want to breed ball pythons. And they buy a whole bunch of hatchlings, and along with the hatchlings, they buy hatchling racks. And the problem with these hatchling racks over here, let me tell you, they don't last very long before your ball pythons outgrow those hatchling racks. And then pretty soon you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have all these hatchling racks, and now I have to move my ball pythons into something like these grow out racks behind me. So you're moving them from one to the other. And really, the way I think you need to think about it as a breeder, especially if you have ball python hatchlings in the hatchling rack, it's kind of a temporary setup, because you either are going to grow some up and you're going to move them into bigger enclosures, or you're going to sell those hatchlings. And I would say most breeders have hatchling racks just as a temporary enclosure to hold and house the hatchlings before they sell them. They don't really plan on keeping them in there very long. And I can go through and kind of show you some of the sizes of my snakes. I have, I think I have close to 100 hatchling tubs in my 2 racks, and out of all those, I only have 1 left. And the only reason I have 1 left is because all these grow out racks behind me, they are completely full, and I can't move a snake in here. And then I have some over here in my grow out racks that are actually too big in here, and I need to move them over to my 7030s. And the problem is my 7030s are completely full, so and my 8018s down there are completely full. So you kind of run up against the wall where you're filling up a whole rack and you don't have space. And the other thing is you kind of have to make some decisions. Either you have to sell some snakes as you kind of grow up and replace some of your other ones, or you have to expand your breeding operation. And let me tell you, I'm to the point here where I'm pretty much wall to wall. I can't fit one more rack in here. I am just pretty much packed in it. The only way I could get rid of, I could get rid of some of these frogs, and I have like one little wire rack with some frogs, but I don't know, I'm not sure if I want to get rid of my frogs and put some more snakes in here. Either that, or I'd have to move this into another room that's a little bit bigger. The problem is if you move to a bigger room, then you have the heating and humidity issues as you expand your operations. So today I kind of want to go through, that was kind of the logistics of what I'm going through as far as the housing. But first I want to kind of break it down and simplify it. I actually have probably, I'd say, the ideal housing for the hobbyist breeder. so if you get your first ball python and you have an aquarium or something like that, like a clear enclosure, a clear tote, or a clear aquarium, and you buy a hide, this is the type of hide that I would recommend. It's totally enclosed on the bottom, and it just has one little hole right here that the ball python can stick his head out. And that is really what you want, a completely enclosed and dark enclosure, because ball pythons really live in the dark. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is if you have an enclosure, it doesn't matter how big it is. Say you have a 200-gallon aquarium and you put something like this in it, essentially this is the size of the enclosure. Whatever is the dark spot that the ball python can get out, get under and hide completely in the dark, that is what the ball python considers the enclosure. And the other thing is when you go into like a rack system, the rack system actually doubles as the hide. So these are completely gray tubs. And the reason I got gray tubs is because, especially for ball pythons, they really like to be in the dark. So I've seen a lot of people buy a rack like this and they'll have semi-transparent or completely clear tubs, and then inside of those tubs they'll have a hide. And the problem is now what you did is you took a whole rack system with really big enclosures for ball pythons and you reduced it down to the size of the hide within the tub. And let me tell you, ball pythons really like to be in the dark. I put ball pythons in these enclosures and they love it. Let me tell you, I used to have them in glass aquariums in these little round hides, and when I moved them in these tubs, they started feeding like crazy because, you know, now instead of just a little tiny hide that they're hiding under, they have an entire tub, which really expands their livable space as far as a ball python. They really like to be mostly in the dark, I would say. So I want to kind of just pick up the camera and give you a quick tour of some of the snakes I have in here, some of the problems I'm running up against, and some of the sizes of the ball pythons, and kind of how I'm thinking about cycling through some of these snakes and replacing some with some higher quality morphs. All right, so these racks are made by ARS Caging, really high-end, really high quality racks, and this is essentially my hatchling rack here. And during the breeding season I had this completely full. I actually have another hatchling rack kind of tucked back in the corner. This is actually an ARS 1065. It actually has 65 tubs, and since I'm not using it, it's really just a temporary rack that I use when I'm in the middle of the ball python breeding season. Holds them just long enough until I can sell or pretty much hold them back. So what I did is I pretty much moved all these out. I sold all of them except one. I got one kind of a lone straggler in here. And I would say this is probably the maximum size that you would want as far as a ball python in a tub. So this is pretty much going to outgrow this tub already. This is, you know, this is a good size to actually move them up to a bigger tub. You know, you figure any bigger than that, and they have kind of a hard time kind of wrapping and coiling. And that guy looks like he's going to take a bite at the camera. He looks pretty snappy. And I just went through and changed all the bedding, so I'm not sure what he's all upset about. But usually it's probably in a feeding mode is what it is mostly. So I just have one in here, and then I moved all of those pretty much over into these tubs. So if you look at this snake in here, let me bring a little light over. This is a really good size to move up into this. This is actually an ARS 5040 tub. So this snake will essentially grow quite a bit bigger. It'll give him a lot of room to grow. As a matter of fact, if I was getting snakes as pets and I wanted them to grow up in a tub, I would probably get a small snake and build up the coconut husk in a tub like this, and then just dig out a corner in the back and then just kind of pop them in the corner right on the hot spot. And then they could kind of crawl up, get the water, and essentially the back corner would be their kind of little private area back there, and let them kind of grow into the tub instead of going from a hatchling tub over to this tub. And there's a lot of snakes there's actually a lot of breeders that'll actually breed in these tubs. I'm actually breeding this clown this year, and she could lay a clutch of eggs. She's looking really good. But the thing is some snakes will outgrow this. As a matter of fact, I think almost all snakes will outgrow these 5040 tubs. So take a look at this. This is my bamboo male, and look how jammed he is in this tub. He is really, really jammed in there. So that's the hot. So this snake is definitely way too big to be in this tub. And the only reason he's in here is because I just have too many snakes, and I'm still trying to sell some at the show and free up some room. So there's a show in about 6 weeks, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move some of these out of these tubs. So for example, this is a really big female that just laid eggs. So I'm thinking of bringing some of these big normal females to the shows to sell, and then replace them with like that big bamboo. And then some of this other stuff, I just freed up another one. I sold one at a show, my pastel desert ghost female over here. So she was definitely outgrowing those smaller tubs, and I moved her up into this tub, which is what she really needs. Is she needed a bigger tub, and even this tub she fills the whole thing. And then for my super large snakes, I actually move them down into some of these ARS 8018, and normally these tubs are really not designed for ball pythons. This is really kind of, I actually was going to breed Woma pythons, and I bought these, and then after I actually bought these, I decided to go all into ball pythons instead of doing the Woma pythons, mostly because the Womas didn't really have the morphs associated with it, and I thought it was a little bit harder to unload the Woma. The Australian Womas are really cool snakes, and they still, you know, command a pretty decent price, you know, for the Woma pythons. But you know, all these in here, I would say these are like the biggest snakes that I have. And actually, I'm going through all my snakes and all my tubs and cleaning them. This one I haven't actually cleaned yet. I'm all the way down to just these ARS 8018s, and I'm almost done cleaning all these, kind of cycling through. But this snake right here is definitely one of the snakes that, you know, it's, if you look at the size of that snake and you compare it to the size of this tub, it's almost too big for an ARS 7030, so I moved them down to the 8018. This one's really gravid, full of eggs. She's gonna lay any day now, which is pretty awesome. So that's pretty much it. And then if you're talking about tub size for retics, this is my reticulated python in this big boa tub. These are really designed for boas. I have my super dwarf male in here, who's been finally on feed. He's doing really good. And the problem with these retics is they grow incredibly fast. And talk about a challenge as far as the tub size. You know, they start in these little hatchling racks, and within, you know, 6 months they're moving to these bigger ones, and then within, you know, 2 years they're basically outgrowing everything. And I had Lucy in here, and she outgrew this boa tub, and I had to move her into a 6-foot enclosure out on my pool table. She is a really big snake. I'll show you her really quick. And the problem with these big enclosures is that I don't know what this guy's gonna do. With the big enclosures, the problem is cleaning the enclosures. Let's see what this guy's gonna do. All right, buddy, don't get your head stuck. These retics are really, they're really kind of a peaceful snake, as long as they're not in feeding mode. They're pretty good. You get them in feeding mode or like in a flight mode, and they can get kind of sketchy, but other than that. So that is pretty much the struggles that I face as far as tub sizes and trying to figure it all out. I think this guy just wants to kind of explore a little bit. He's kind of checking the place out. As long as he doesn't get his head stuck anywhere, he'll be fine. So, you know, that's, you know, I think the biggest thing is chasing the growth of the snakes as they get bigger and bigger, and especially with these retics. But ball pythons will get a lot bigger than you can even imagine. They grow so big so fast, and it's kind of interesting that a lot of people don't think about the growth rate when they're picking out tubs, you know, and they're investing in the equipment, because, you know, they outgrow them really quick. This guy is really cool. He's a really neat snake. This guy is a lavender albino reticulated python, 37.5% super dwarf, which is the reason he's only 30 pounds instead of, you know, 100 pounds. You know, retics can get, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but he'll stay pretty small because he's got super dwarf in him. He's a really cool snake. So talk about enclosures and a challenging snake. This is Lucy, and look at how big she is. You can't even imagine. You really can't get a feel for how big she is. She is, I'm thinking she's close to 70 pounds now. As a matter of fact, you know, I had some of my viewers say, you know, that snake doesn't look 70 pounds. And it's pretty much time to actually clean this enclosure. So what I'm gonna do probably on my next video is take her out, and I'm gonna do an ultrasound, see if she's got eggs. I've been pairing her up this year. And then we're gonna take a weight on her, and then I'm gonna clean her enclosure, which is always fun to do. You never know what these big snakes are gonna do. And probably, I might have to get a second person to help me on this one, because she is almost to the size where I definitely need a second person, because she is really big. And when I got her, she was extremely tiny. Actually had her in the smaller tubs, and she grew like a rocket. I couldn't even believe it. All right, so that is the discussion on the enclosure size for ball pythons. I would probably not put a really small snake in a really big tub. Sometimes they can kind of freak out and they don't really feel secure. And to kind of trick them, you know, it's always good to have a lot of substrate for a small snake and kind of dig a hole in the back, put them in the back, and that kind of works most of the time for me. And I can put a smaller snake in a bigger tub, but a lot of times they will actually go off a feed. Probably the best thing to do is slowly move them up from a small tub to a medium tub to a big to an extra large tub as they grow in size, which makes it a challenge for the keeper and the breeder. No matter what you have ball pythons for, sometimes it's really a challenge to keep up with the growth rate, and it really depends on how big the snake is when you get it too. So for example, if you got a really big ball python as an adult, you may just pick out one tub and be done with it. You know, it's like a full-size tub for a full-size snake, and that snake's not going to grow. I'd say there's more of a challenge with a hatchling trying to chase the growth rate as you go through the enclosures. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.